Hey, gang, it's Jimmie coming to you with Arkansas First. We've had such chaos in the Republican Party of Arkansas this year that nobody would ever dreamed it. And it all seems to center around some goings on in the Saline County Republican County Committee. Now, Jennifer Lancaster has been a lightning rod for hate as far as that chaos goes. Jennifer is the second district chairwoman for the Republican Party of Arkansas. She was the 2024 state convention chair, who has led a grassroots and patriot movement to bring about positive change in the Republican Party of Arkansas. When she got into that, though, she never dreamed that there would be so many roadblocks. I think she probably thought there would be from the establishment, but she never dreamed there would be actually roadblocks from people that were in the grassroots patriot movement that would start to roadblock because they have a position of power, and power corrupts, and that's what they want. And so she has been through a lot this summer and fall, but has really never sat down and talked about it. She's kind of started to stay quiet, take the higher road. I've been after her a long time to do this. I've been after her a long time to come on with me and say, look, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. So, hey, Jennifer, I'm glad you came on to finally start bringing this out and from your perspective.
Hey, Jimmie, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to talk about this.
And well, I tell people all the time, it's easy for people to punch a punching bag because a punching bag doesn't punch back. You really try to take the high road and just be that punching bag. So tonight, it's not that you're looking to hurt somebody. You just want to clear the air on some things. So why don't you take us to Saline County Republican Committee? Give us just a quick background of maybe what boiled us up to the surface.
Sure, happy to. So back in 2022, people probably remember when the Pulaski County folks, many of them, the Pulaski County Patriots is what they're often referred to as, they took over the Pulaski County Committee. Lorri Justice was elected as their county convention chair, and they had about 70 plus folks that were elected as convention delegates. Well, when they arrived at the convention center, they were all escorted out of the building by the police. They weren't allowed to be seated. I actually made the motion for them to be seated at that meeting, and the motion failed. And so it was after that, it was actually during that meeting that my eyes were opened to how people with dissenting voices are treated even within our own party. And I was appalled and I was so disappointed. But after some time to reflect and really process through what I'd witnessed, I realized that if the Pulaski County folks, they were resolved, they were going to keep fighting, they were going to stay the course, but they would continue to be outcast until their numbers grew. Well, the only way for that to happen was if like-minded conservative folks stood up and came alongside them and helped them out. And so I reached out to some folks in Saline County, told them what I saw at the convention, told them what I had witnessed over the last few years of being heavily involved in the party, and what I thought the problems were and how I thought we could address them and make things better. And so I brought in about a handful of folks. I invited them to a meeting in my living room. And really, that's where I would say the Saline County Patriot movement was born. One of those ladies at that meeting, her name was Stephanie Duke, and she has been just a vital part of the momentum in Saline County. And most people don't know that because she's silent about it. She doesn't want the attention. She doesn't want the praise. But she has been, well, I would just say without her, Saline County, the Saline County Committee would not be what it is today. So she came along with some other folks, and she actually brought Scott and Allison Gray. She invited them to attend. And I said, well, who are these people? I don't know them. And she said, no, I really believe that they're solid conservatives. And so she invited them, and that's how I got to know them. And so really from those, we probably had 34, actually probably about 5 meetings at my home before we started recruiting folks, telling them what our mission was, which was to bring in like-minded Christian folks who wanted to see biblical principles restored to the Republican Party. We no longer wanted it just to be some empty phrases. We wanted people to be acting on it. So we brought them in, and that is when Saline County really started to grow.
Let me jump in there because you said something that stuck out at me. Everybody watching this podcast is going to know who Scott Gray is. Okay. Scott Gray has put the narrative out that basically he started the Grassroots Patriot effort in Saline County Republican Committee, and he grew the committee. Now, from what you're telling me, that's not true. Is that correct?
He did not start it. He and his family, of course, have contributed to it and contributed to the momentum in big ways. But no, he didn't start it. It has certainly been
he has a narrative out that this was born from him, that he reached out and he started this group, and he really, from what you're telling me, it was more Stephanie Duke and you. Is that correct?
I think a lot of the credit belongs to Stephanie Duke. And the reason why is because she recruited the majority of the people that are the Saline County Republican Committee today.
She actually recruited Scott Gray.
I'm sorry?
She actually recruited Scott Gray. Okay.
Yes, more than any of us, I would even say combined, it was her. She's not just a huge part of the Saline County Republican Committee. She is a central figure in the Saline County community. She is well respected. She is a prayer warrior. She is everything I hope to be someday. She is someone that I can go to and confide in, and she's trustworthy, and in everything that she does, she looks to God for guidance, and she is constantly in the Word. And when there are challenges that we face, she will send scripture that is relevant and that is meant to provide wisdom and inspiration. And so that is who she is. She is a very successful businesswoman, but she's also just respected for who she is because she speaks truth in a very classy and loving way. Even the hard truths, people who hear it, while they may be offended by it, they know that her intention is not to offend. It is just to spread truth. And so, yes, I would say that most of the credit belongs to her because she not only brought them in, she also paid for a lot of their dues. She has poured money into this in ways that people will never know because she doesn't talk about it. So, yes, I would say a lot of the credit belongs to Stephanie Duke for getting the Saline County Republican Committee started. And of course, people came together and they contributed their skills and resources, and it is grown from there. But yeah, she really does deserve a lot of that credit. So yeah, I think it's important people understand that there are a lot of people that are involved in the growth and the success of Saline County. So, I think now the question is, well, what happened? Because Saline County was, we're again kind of like a firebrand, right? We're going out there and we're fighting issues and we're growing. I mean, I think we're probably the biggest county in the Republican county in the state at over 200 members.
Yeah, the last number I got was 205 members, and that was such a rapid growth. But anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah, so really, we had some great success with the convention, and unfortunately, I think some egos kind of they grew from there, unfortunately. And that's not uncommon, but I think people often heard me saying, especially after the convention, that we have to stay humble. Pride comes before a fall. If we get proud because of our successes, then that is when the whole thing could fall apart. We're not invincible. And unfortunately.
Let me ask you this, okay? You talk about ego and pride. Was it ego and pride, or is it a quest and a thirst for power?
Well, I think they're hand in hand. I do. Unfortunately, from what I have observed, and as you said, I was quiet. And I was quiet for a reason. I would actually say I was quiet for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons was I was observing. I was learning some things that I did not realize prior to the drama of Saline County. And one of those things that I learned is, yes, that some of the folks that were waving the banner of local control did not, in fact, want local control. They wanted the control. And because they were not at the top of the power pyramid, so to speak, when they were claiming local control, what they were saying is, I want that control. And it was discouraging to see because I think people, and maybe some of them did believe that what they were saying was true, that they believed in local control, but when it came to actually applying that principle, they failed.
Yeah.
And I will say, and I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but even with Saline County, as the drama was occurring, the Grays and a handful of the other folks, when they saw that they no longer had support in Saline County, they went outside of the county and were trying to garner support there because they didn't have it inside Saline County. And I gave a lot of those folks the benefit of the doubt, thinking, well, if they believe in local control, they're not going to interfere in a county committee's business, right? Well, I was very wrong. And that's when I started to see that a lot of these folks really were just wanting that control themselves, and they were wanting to control what was happening in Saline County.
What, let me make clear to folks is when you saw what was going on in Saline County, you'd seen it building, you finally got to say, hey, this is just getting too out of control. This is not what the Patriot Movement's about. These people are literally trying to seize power to control everything. And you started to push back on that and represent the people. And where I'm going with this is when they did start reaching out, because Scott Gray actually called me way back on this and about Saline County, Republican County business. And he started talking about you. And I asked him, I said, why are you calling me? I'm not part of Saline County Republican Committee. And he actually was calling to recruit me to go against you. Mm-hmm. And I'm very comfortable saying that. And I pretty much sent him packing with this. And I even told him, I said, why are you telling me this? Because I'm not part of Saline County. But I want folks to know, when you say that he reached out around the state outside of the county looking for support or looking for people to be on his side, he called me.
Yeah.
He called me and wanted me to do it.
I heard a lot of reports about the Grays and, well, specifically the Grays, just calling folks, trying to recruit them to their side. And I did not engage in that for a couple of reasons. One, the county, a vast number of the county committee members, they approached me for help with this issue. Mm-hmm. And so as a member of Saline County and as their second district chair, I didn't want to be talking about the events of Saline County when they're coming to me as their chair, because I didn't want other counties to think that if they came to me with a problem that I would then turn around and share their issues with other counties. Mm-hmm. So it was a part of just maintaining that that integrity of that district chair county committee relationship. I wanted them to know that if they shared something with me or they asked for help, that it was not going to be me that was sharing it across the district with other counties or even across the state. So that is part of the reason. Also, while yes, I did choose to kind of step out front of this issue, I want to explain why I did that. But to do that, I want to go back to really the catalyst and where all the drama came from. And if we remember, our state convention was held on June 7th. Well, the next Saline County Republican Committee meeting was held on July 1st. And it was at that meeting that the chair asked for a motion to remove 33 members from our roll. Now, these are members that, yes, they had not attended. They had not been attending. They had missed 4 meetings. And under the rules, it does say that anyone who misses 4 consecutive meetings shall be referred to the executive committee for recommendations to the body. Well, the executive committee recommended that we remove these people from membership. Now, this is a rule that, to my knowledge, as a member of Saline County Republican Committee for years, it had never been used. There was no notice given that we were going to start using this rule. And I will say it was actually me that brought this rule even to the current executive committee's attention. Because it is a rule, we need to follow it. But that doesn't mean that we have to kick people out.
So your intention by bringing that up is to say, okay, hey, it is a rule. So your intention bringing it up is to say, hey, let's reach out to these people and say, look, you haven't been attending. Do you want to be a part of this committee or you don't? That's fine. Just let us know so we can remove you from the rolls, have a vote to remove you from the rolls. If you want to re-engage, then come on back and re-engage, but just know that you got to attend these meetings. That was kind of your goal, right?
Right, right. To follow the rules. I mean, I bang this drum about following the rules, right? And so when I was through my reading, when I saw it, I said, hey, this is not a rule that's been followed. So I think we should start following it. And I did encourage them. I said, you need to make a statement, whether on Facebook or at a meeting, let people know that we're going to start applying this rule. And so that was never done. As a matter of fact, I actually have evidence that it was brought up for the purpose of blindsiding and hopefully just getting these people removed. And I was told personally, and I actually have the document, the people's names, and out to the side, they had been labeled by our executive committee members. I'm pretty sure it was our chair, because he was the one who sent it to me. Rhino, establishment, elected official. Pretty much all of them were elected officials or ran for.
And just so everybody knows, Frank Curtis is the chair.
Yes, he is the chair of the Saline County Republican Committee right now. He's been the chair for a few months. So yes, I got up and I need to say this. After Frank Curtis, the chair, asked for a motion to remove these 33 folks, they then made the argument, a member of the executive committee said that we have to remove them, otherwise we are violating the rules. Well, I got up and I said, that's not true. We are not required to vote according to the executive committee's recommendation. That is their recommendation. We do not have to vote to remove them. And I said, it's actually my opinion that we shouldn't remove them. They have no idea that we're even discussing the possibility of removing them. There's no notice. They're not aware that we're going to start applying this rule. We haven't been applying this rule for years, if not ever. I just don't think that's fair. And I think we can follow the rules and show some grace here. And I even quoted Luke 6:31, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I know if there was a rule that was not being applied and hadn't been for years, and all of a sudden it's going to be applied, I'd like to have notice. Mm-hmm. And so I did make that statement. You can actually see it. It was recorded. And so that was my position. Well, immediately afterwards, I knew Scott Gray was going to be upset with me because I disagreed with their position. And so I went up to him and I said, I'm sorry I spoke against you guys. I hate to do that, but I really feel like this was the right thing to do. I don't think we should be removing these folks without giving them proper notice. And so he called me a milk toaster. He called me a traitor. And then he said that so apparently he and some other folks had been looking at purchasing a building for the Saline County Republican Committee because our current space was getting too small. And he said he was no longer going to contribute to the purchase of a new building because we were catering to rhinos. And so then, so that happened immediately after the meeting.
Let me jump in and just say real quick, trying to say that Jennifer Lancaster caters to rhinos is one of the most absurd statements I've ever heard. And this goes back to something that I've said often, and a lot of people struggle with this, but I am loyal to principle. I am not loyal to people. And in this situation, I think where we can show grace and fairness and follow the rules, we should do that. And so that was my position. So was I catering to any particular person? Absolutely not. And I think it's important to show too that during that discussion, one of the executive members got up and said, we need to kick these people out because they signed on to Doyle Webb's complaint against the county committee. These people, they signed on trying to get some of us removed from our district member positions. I'm the one, they were really targeting me in that situation. I think a lot of people know that because that complaint followed the election of the district chair. And so what they were trying to do was remove some of those folks, Saline County folks, from the district membership. And then they were going to call into question the entire election. If people are not understanding what you're actually saying, I'm going to help them out here a little bit, because at the convention, a motion was made to put some people out of the convention, and your response to the motion was that you're not willing to become what you've been fighting,
right,
so to speak. And so that's basically what happened here. You weren't willing to become what you were battling against with those folks. Just because those folks would do it, you're saying, hey, we're not going to do that. So that, just so that people understand.
Yes, exactly. And so, I will say the executive member made that argument. Basically, this move to remove the 33 members was an act of retaliation by the executive committee. And we're better than that. That's not what we do. We as patriots, we talk about being Christians. That doesn't mean that we're perfect, but we should certainly strive to adhere to biblical principles. And retaliation is not one of those. Justice is mine, saith the Lord. So, yes, I said, I'm opposed to this, and a lot of people agreed with me. And so it became very, very apparent that the motion was going to fail. And so one of the executive members made a motion to table it. And so that's what happened. And then again, I approached Scott Gray immediately after. That's when I was referred to as a traitor and a milk toaster and et cetera. But I also had a lot of folks that approached me that night and said, thank you. Thank you for speaking up. I've disagreed with this as well as a lot of other things that have happened, but I'm afraid I'm going to be targeted if I say anything. And so I had so many people come up to me at that point that I started to realize this is a real problem. Like, I had known that there had been some comments about me and Stephanie Duke because we're kind of seen as the influential ones. So I knew the Grace had made comments about us, but I thought it was just at us. I didn't think it was so widespread.
Let me get 2 points in here. One being is, it seems to me, number one, that this is the July meeting when this happened. That's when it went from a simmer to a boiling point.
Yeah.
And the second point, I want to see if you agree with both these, is that from my interactions, it seems to me that 85 to 90% of the members of the Saline County Republican Committee are in line with, we're not going to be vindictive. We want to follow the rules. We want to do things right, but we're not in on acting like the other side acts. We're not in on acting like them. And so am I right on both those points?
Yes, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that figure, because we had a vote, which we can get into a little bit later, and it showed how overwhelming the solid Christian patriots are and how unified they are, and not engaging in this retaliatory, vindictive behavior. So, and I guess to your point, yes, July 1st became that boiling point. I know there have been some comments about things that I've said and I've done in months and years past, but the proof is there that it was that night when I spoke up against the removal of those 33 folks. That was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back. And you can see it because Scott Gray and I were texting, and that's not uncommon. Usually during meetings, we'll text back and forth. And so, as usual, we're texting back and forth. And when I got up and spoke against the removal of the 33, that's when there was this abrupt change. And he asked me a few more questions like, well, are you still going to oppose it if we give them notice? Are you still, I think he asked one other question, and that was it. We actually have not communicated since. And so, yeah.
No. When all that happened, immediately you started facing some pretty hard attacks along with some other folks thinking, you were labeled a Jezebel, number one, a narcissist. Frank Curtis himself in a text called you a narcissist. A lot of sexism immediately came out about you being a woman and an angry woman and things like that. And so the attacks really intensified at that point. I want you to address something that you probably don't even know I know about. They actually, to try to quell it, they saw what you were doing. They lashed out at you. Then they realized that the overwhelming majority of the people in the committee did not want to go the direction they did. So then they started to, so to speak, pull their horns in or try to. And they actually reached out. You and Frank go to the same church, apparently. Mm-hmm. And they, in fact, reached out to your pastor for him to get involved in this dispute, so to speak. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So before I get to that point, I want to rewind back to July 1st. That same Saline County Republican meeting, because that night after I went up and talked to Scott, I went to Frank and I said, Frank, we need to talk ASAP. Because you could feel the tension in the room. And based on what I was hearing, I was recognizing that we had a very big problem on our hands. Also, I think it's important to notice that that night on July 1st, we had a very conservative JP who had been fighting very hard against the pornography in our local library. I mean, he was a champion for us, and he resigned that night publicly, and he credited a speech that Frank Curtis had given at a previous meeting, calling a lot of folks in the committee rhinos and communists and things like that. And so he resigned. And so I just saw this was a big problem. And so I said, hey, I told him, I said, this county committee is headed in a very dangerous down a very dangerous path, and we need to talk. So we talked the next morning. I explained to him, I was very direct. I'm pretty direct. I don't sugarcoat things, especially when talking to somebody about important issues. So I told him, I said, you're going to have to get a hold of the county committee. You're going to have to start leading, and that means making some tough decisions, and you're going to need to make them very quickly. The conversation continued until the next day. I did send him a very direct email explaining what the problem was. He said, well, can I just run all these issues past, or all of our motions past you before the meeting? And I said, no. And the reason why, I wasn't being difficult, but number one, I don't have the time, because I get a lot of people asking me to review documents or things like that. I can't be involved in everything and do a good job for everybody. So I said, no, I cannot commit to doing that. Also, when he asked me to be a part of that, I just said, the real issue here, it's not that you guys made the motion. It's the response to the fact that people disagreed with your recommendation. It's that people should feel free to speak up and say, I disagree. Can we do this? That's what we're fighting for. That's what we're championing here. We want people to feel the freedom to speak up and disagree. And when you guys come and you start attacking folks, because I wasn't the only one. Beth said, you're attacking your second district chair, because I very respectfully disagreed with you guys. And people are telling me that they're afraid to speak up out of fear of retaliation. And I see it. I see that that's not empty words, because you guys are doing it to me. And so, that's what we need to address here. You should be able to go and make your recommendations, but be okay with people disagreeing with you.
Right.
That's what we're about. So, anyways, in response to that is when he started calling me a narcissist. I'm a mess. I don't even remember all the other things. And
angry woman, I think, was one of them. Angry woman.
Yeah. And so that's when I just said, that's not how adults communicate. That's not how I communicate. If you just start with the name calling, the conversation if
you're going to call me names, and you're going to call me a narcissist, and you're going to call me a Jezebel, and you're going to call me an angry woman, and you're going to do all that, then how can you sit down and have a serious conversation with somebody who's doing that? You can't.
Right. And my text was very lengthy, because I was explaining the issues and how it needed to be addressed, why it was wrong, and what we needed to do to correct it. And so in response to that, I get called names. That's why I was just like, well, this is clearly not going anywhere. I said, I think it's just time we quit talking, because I'm not going to communicate with someone who communicates like that. We're adults. We're not 5.
No reason to.
I don't even let my children communicate that way. If they start name calling, well, they don't. I will tell you, at 8 and 10, they don't even engage in name calling, because they've just learned not to do that. So, anyways, it's not that I got all offended. He called me a narcissist. It was just like, well,
So at that point, they're pulling their horns in, so to speak. They're going, oh, okay, what do we do now? Because now they're realizing that the people have about had enough of them. So that's when they reach out to your pastor.
Somebody did reach out to my pastor, because there are a number of folks that are Saline County Patriots from my church. And so somebody reached out to my pastor and said, hey, will you reach out to Frank and Jennifer and see if you can talk to them? Well, what they didn't know is that I'm very close to my pastor's wife. She actually discipled me for quite a while, and we had a lot of conversations. She had come to me actually and said, is there anything you can do about Scott Gray and the way he speaks to people? And that had probably been about 6 to 9 months prior to this July 1st meeting. And so they knew it was something that I had been trying to address. And I also think it's important to say that July 1st meeting, it's not like this is a one-time issue. There had been a lot of issues that had led up to July 1st. But to answer your question about meeting with the pastor, he did send an email. He offered to sit down with me and Frank. I called him immediately. I actually called my pastor's wife. She was with them. I was on speaker and I said, hey, I appreciate you reaching out. I know you're really busy. They had some things going on. I said, but I'm going to respectfully decline because I've had a lot of conversations with him and he's apologized probably 3 or 4 times now, but the behavior doesn't change. As a matter of fact, it just keeps getting worse. And so while we'll sit down and he's going to say, oh, okay, he's going to sound like we're moving forward. The truth is we're not. And it's just going to be a waste of both of our time. And he was like, you know what? I get it. I know you've been working on this a really long time. He said, please just send an email so I can say I heard back from you and appreciate what you're doing. That was it. So that's what I did. I sent an email saying exactly what I told you. I just said, hey, Pastor Dave, thank you for your offer, but I'm going to decline because Frank has apologized so many times, but I don't see that heart change. I don't see the behavior change. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you have it there, but he apologized probably in text 3 or 4 times, but then he would post things like, there's this meme he posted. He said to the Lancasters and their minions, and apparently I don't watch South Park, so I was told it's an image of 2 South Park characters, and one of them is holding a doll, talking to the other person, saying, where on this doll did Scott Gray hurt you? And so he apologized, but that's the kind of behavior that we're seeing. And so that's why
I want to point out that Frank Curtis put that out on the Saline County Republican Committee Facebook page.
Yes, that wasn't his personal page. It was the Saline County Republican Committee page. And
that's how petty and childish. Petty and childish. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the behavior that I've seen.
Frank Curtis
just walk away. You just walk away.
Frank Curtis is the same guy that refers to John Newcomb as just being a teddy bear.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, consider the source on that. So
yes. So yeah, that's really the truth behind it. So I didn't just dismiss my pastor. I called him and explained, and he was like, I understand. So that's the story behind that. But I think it's important to go back to this July 1st, because for a lot of people, they may think, well, if it was just the July 1st event, you guys should have worked that out. Well, like I said, there was a lot of things that happened in the 2 to 3 years prior to that July 1st meeting. One of which was Scott Gray. This last primary season, he had a client, and that he was representing. He was doing the marketing and he was helping her run her JP race. Well, part of his marketing strategy was to call her opponent a pedophile and to say that he wrote a book on sex and drugs. Well, the man was not a pedophile. And when I pushed Scott Gray for the evidence for that, because that's an awful accusation. And I said, well, where's your evidence? And he kept saying, for days, he would say, I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to get it to you. Finally, I said, tell me what it is. Just tell me what you have. And he had nothing. Yeah. The only thing he could refer to is he was like, well, he made some comment on social media that somebody was acting like somebody else had, peed in their Cheerios. Oh, well, that's gross and vulgar. That is not an indicator. It's certainly not a basis to call somebody a pedophile.
All right. Now you can't say, but I got to jump in there because this is going to sound crude to some people. But since I'm 62 years old, and since I can remember, people was always use the analogy said, who pissed in your cornflakes this morning? And that's literally what the guy was saying, right?
Yeah, I guess it's like a country saying. But
it is. Who made you mad this morning? It's not anything to do with if that makes you a pedophile, I'm a pedophile. Okay?
Jimmie.
Because I've said that, I know telling how many times. All right.
It's awful. And the truth is there was no evidence. It was just something that he made up about his client's opponent to help her win. That's disgusting. And we should have absolutely no part of that. And then regarding the book that his client's opponent wrote, his client's opponent is, I believe he's a pastor now. And, or if not, he's heavily involved in his church. He wrote a book about his life before Christ. The book was about redemption and how Christ saved him from himself. So to minimize that and reduce it down to just a book about sex and drugs, it's absolutely not accurate. But we see this kind of speak from the Grays, specifically Scott, so often that it leaves a lot of us to question the truth, like what is really going on here. But also we have to stand up against this, because even if these kind of remarks are aimed at folks that are, quote, not on our side, it's still a lie. It's still manipulation and still wrong. And we as Christians have to stand up against that and say, no, we're not going to be a part of that. And we're not going to allow that to be said against anybody, whether they're with us or not, because it's just wrong.
You're right. And when Frank Scott Jr., the mayor of Little Rock, and if people don't know, they can go look. I've battled Frank Scott hard. And during his last election, there was a group. I mean, I've exposed Frank Scott for so much stuff that's not even funny. But there was a group that came out, a PAC, and they went after him in ads with things that just were not true. Well, I publicly stood up and even went to a Little Rock board meeting and said, look, I'm no friend of Frank Scott, and here's what, and I'm going to tell you what he's done, and I'm going to prove it. But what these people are doing are literally making things up and putting out there, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's kind of where you're coming from, right?
Right. Listen, I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to tell everybody the truth that I know, that I have heard, read, witnessed, experienced. Like, I will share that information with you, no matter who it makes mad. I'm not going to engage in lies and character assassination against other folks for the sake of character assassination. I mean, it's just wrong. But, that's not the only example either. There was so much. We had our own Candy Cox. She is the one with the cute pixie cut. She was up back and forth at the convention, making motions, very active. She's a strong leader. She disagreed with the Grays. And guess what? They had that same client that I was just talking about. That same client went and filed a police report against her, accusing her of some awful things. Now, as soon as that police report was filed, and I have written evidence that our chairman knew about this before it was filed, and we have it in writing that the Grays were the ones that inspired and encouraged Stephanie Johnson to file this report. So they were all in on it. And as soon as it was filed, our chairman sent a mass text to all of our county committee members saying that Candy and Stephanie Duke were under, I think it was just Stephanie, was under investigation. And the reason why he sent that out was to discredit her, because she too was disagreeing with the approach that our executive committee was taking. Frank Curtis and the Grays and the Almonds and John Nuke. And so that we saw a lot of this. And then also they filed Allison Gray and our secretary. Again, all of these people are part of our executive board. They were a part of, they provided statements to a lady who filed an ethics complaint against one of our Republican JPs. And that complaint was filed during the primary when Allison ran against that JP. And so it was completely dismissed because everything in it was untrue. But there's some really awful allegations in that ethics complaint. So again, there's some egregious behavior that we cannot just turn a blind eye to. And I will tell you that same JP, he signed on a complaint against me. So it's not that I'm necessarily defending the individual. I am fighting back against this awful behavior, the lies, the deceit, the retaliation. That is what I'm standing against. And also they did the same thing to Doyle. That ethics complaint that Doyle Webb is experiencing.
They filed
that was filed by that same JP who
Stephanie Johnson.
Stephanie Johnson, and it was filed within a week of Doyle and some other folks giving us a notice to vacate the building. It was done in retaliation. So it's, again,
A
I am
couple
not.
things. A couple things on the complaint against Dole. Stephanie Johnson and Scott Gray actually reached out to me when they did that and wanted me to run with it and everything, and I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it because I already know, and it's not like I'm friends with Doyle Webb, okay? But if you've got something that's true, that's fine. I'll report on it. I'll take it out there. But I looked at that complaint and I'm not seeing anything. That's just an attack, okay? And I'm not even friends with Doyle Webb. I can tell you, Doyle Webb is not going to call me tomorrow and say, "Hey, Jimmie, let's go have a cup of coffee and eat lunch."
Yeah.
The other thing, Stephanie Johnson, I want to make clear people understand this. When Frank Curtis said that Benton Police Department had launched an investigation, that's not true at all. I got all the records on that. I even got the body cam videos of the officers taking the report from her. And there was never an investigation started by the Benton PD, and there's nothing to investigate. Matter of fact, they didn't even classify it as an incident report. They did it as an informational report. Mm-hmm. And when you watch the body camera, the officers were just kind of looking around, rolling their eyes like, okay, and we got to take this informational report. But, it's there. So folks understand nothing there.
There's nothing there. When I called to get the police report, I was talking to the officer and I said, "Yeah, it's pretty silly." And she chuckled and she goes, "Yeah." Like, she was like, "It sure is." And again, it didn't go anywhere because it's just, there's no truth. What they do is they antagonize people.
They took an information report because they had to.
Right.
That's the only reason they even took that report.
Yes. They accepted the report because they have to. But those are being used by members of our executive committee, specifically the Grays and Stephanie Johnson, as weapons against people who disagree with them. It's a bully tactic, and it's unacceptable. Again, they did it with Doyle. They've done it with so many people. I have so many more examples, but we would be here all night. So when after July 1st, when that happened, I started learning about these things. Before July 1st, I was not aware of this ethics complaint, either ethics complaint. And so when I saw that, I thought, this is unacceptable. And so, yes, I put myself at the head of the spear, so to speak, because I'm the 2nd district chair and people trust me. And I just felt like that was the right thing to do. And so I did it. I even told Sarah Dunklin at the time, I said, they're going to start a smear campaign against me, and they're going to use that list that you gave them, the statewide list, and they're going to spread it all over the state. I have a really thick skin though, and things like that don't really bother me. So that was another reason why I thought it should just be me anyway.
That's one thing I want to get into, because that is the point where Saline County, Republican County business actually mushroomed out and seemed to overtake the state, so to speak, in something that should have just been in Saline County. That's when we start getting the involvement of Sarah Dunklin, Lorri Justice, the chairwoman of the Pulaski County Republican Committee, Courtney Roldan down in Lonoke County. She's not the chairman of the Lonoke County Republican Committee, but she does everything down there. She basically might as well be the chairman, I guess. And we started getting Jennifer Hopper, who was the secretary at the June 2024 convention. We started seeing those people get involved. We even saw Conduit News start getting involved in this in a negative way. So I want to kind of go to that now and talk about this influx and what effect it had on the grassroots patriot movement for the convention.
Yeah, so we did have a meeting. It was not a formal Saline County Republican meeting, but when so many people approached me voicing their concerns about their fear of retaliation if they spoke up, if they disagreed with our executive board, I started reaching out to some folks, and I was like, we need to talk. I want to hear what your experience has been, because I was realizing that I was not privy to a lot of the things that had happened. So we did have an informal meeting, and we talked, and people were able to share their experiences. From there, we did call a special meeting, a formal special meeting of the Saline County Republican Committee. And the purpose was to sanction Scott Gray, Allison Gray, Frank Curtis, and Stephanie Johnson. And they were all censored, and complaints had been filed. Now, there were some rumors. I think Lorri Justice may have started them. We were going to kick them out unfairly. We weren't going to follow the rules. We were totally following the rules. But now they still try to say all that. But
no, let me make a point on that, because no, that's true. When that was going on, Lorri Justice, Courtney Roldan, Sarah Dunklin got involved in it. All began making a case, because I guess Scott Gray got in their ear and told them certain things, that you guys were going to illegally, well, they specifically said not the group, but you were going to illegally have them removed.
Right. Well, first of all, I can't. Yeah. I don't have that power or that influence.
Right.
It would take a body. And I believe that night we had 70 people at that meeting. And I think it was unanimous to censor all of those individuals. There may have been one or two. Well, no, I take that back. There was one, I think it was Angela Gray, which I kind of voiced. People wanted to censor her, even though it wasn't specifically planned. They wanted to censor her. I spoke against that because I was not aware of any rule violations. Had she said things that she shouldn't have? Yes, but that's not a rules violation. So I was opposed to that. The others, there were clear rules violations. But nonetheless, so we held our meeting. Frank Curtis decided, he sent out an email and said, this is not a proper meeting. You cannot have it. Any business you hold, it's void. Well, he doesn't have the authority to do that. And if he believed that there was a rules violation, he should have gone through the appropriate avenue to deal with a rules violation, not just unilaterally tell everybody what you're doing doesn't count. I mean, then he's kind of operating like a king, right? And that's what we're against. So nonetheless, the people got together. The county committee got together. The executive board did not show up. And that is when we moved forward with filing the complaints and censoring those named individuals. So yes, what the Grays did, and they do this. This is a tactic of theirs. They'll start a group text, and they will include people that they believe they can either influence or are going to agree with them out of the gate. And then they will keep making these exaggerated comments that keep people worked up and emotional and angry. And some people that stuff appeals to. People who want to feel involved in something and who like that emotional element all the time. You know, they'll drop that and they'll keep those people worked up. And so then those people will go out on social media and they will make all kinds of outlandish statements. And so he did that. He did that he had a group text going where he and Frank would constantly make these awful accusations that were most of the time not even true, not remotely true, not even a iota of truth to it. They also started a Telegram thread where they could do the same thing, and they would just get people mad and worked up, and they would tell them things. But, you know, there are some people who can figure it out and figure out that a lot of the things are not true, they're not accurate, and they're not getting the full story. I'll tell you, for me, for example, the Grays started, I think I should go back. That night that we had that special meeting, one of the Grays followers came up to me and he said, if you keep, what were his exact words? He said, if you continue down this path, if you keep trying to censor the Grays and Frank, then we're going to make sure you lose your 2nd district chair and convention chair position. And I laughed because I'm like, that's not what this is about. Like, I don't, these positions are, I mean, they're just to serve the people. So to threaten me with them when it's a lot of work, it just seemed like a curious threat to me.
Well, let me tell the folks this, because I had a conversation with you probably about this time or a little before, when you started getting these attacks and these threats. And I remember telling you that these attacks are only going to become more frequent and they're only going to become more vicious. And they did, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they took on a viciousness level that few folks see.
Yeah.
But But I do want to get into this in the sense that the viciousness just didn't come from that group. It had spread throughout the state, so to speak. So then you get people like, here again, Lorri Justice, Courtney Roldan, Margot Herzl up in Searcy County, guy like, what's his name, Skip Thomas, yeah, the so-called Emmy-winning guy and everything. You start getting Scott Bales. You start getting these vicious attacks from Scott Gray, who has gone out and done all that. And so you started feeling those, but at the same time, what that was causing was a problem of abandonment from these people to the actual grassroots folks in the convention. Can I start talking about that?
Yeah, so I think it's important to go back. So, like I mentioned, the Grays start these text groups, and I think this particular one that I'm thinking of and I'm about to reference may have been started by Courtney Roldan, but they kind of commandeer them to further their agenda, which is to turn people against certain individuals. And that's what they were doing, was they were trying to turn some folks against me through that process, and that gets those people worked up. But I also want to say that while, yes, there have been a lot of attacks against me on the statewide level, I can take it, and I'm not their only target. What people need to understand is that this same level of attacks and these vicious lies and just the smear campaign, that is what our own patriots have experienced in Saline County for the last 2 years. Anyone that spoke up against the Grays, they became a target. And so, yeah, I mean, I just hope people's eyes can be opened that I'm not the first person that they targeted, and I will not be the last. So I hope people realize, hey, that's pretty vicious. That's big time. I don't want that happening to me. And I would caution people to be careful of their associations. So, back to Courtney and Margot, that is when I started to see that there were these people who were claiming local control but wouldn't practice it. So in Saline County, when these issues were coming up, they wanted to come in and control it. Lorri Justice did call me, and she said, hey, what's going on? Tell me, and maybe I can help. And I said, Lorri, I appreciate the call, but this is a Saline County issue. It's going to be handled by Saline County. We just need to do some housekeeping and all will be well. That's what I said.
Let me jump in there because you brought up Lorri Justice and that. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell people, I broke a deal about her that she's Pulaski County chair, the chair of the Pulaski County Republican Committee, but she doesn't live in Pulaski County. That's just a fact. Okay. And we proved that. And she didn't want anybody really to know that, but she had told a few people. And so she had actually moved to Saline County. Okay. That's where she's living now. That's where she was living 2 months ago. That's where she's living 3 months ago. That's where she was living for quite a while. It's just nobody knew that. Okay. So eventually her reign of power in Pulaski County is going to end. And so she actually was getting involved in Saline County politics. That's not you saying it. This is me saying it. Don't have a problem saying it. She actually got involved in Saline County politics, trying to wiggle her way in there because she knew she wasn't going to run Pulaski County anymore, and she wanted to run Saline County.
Well, yes, and I do agree with that. So when she moved, around the time she moved, she was attending almost all of our meetings, Patriot meetings, county committee meetings, and as well as her Pulaski County meetings. She was very involved. I had a lot of people ask me, why is she coming to our meetings? And so, yeah, that's why, is because she lives in Saline County, and, with the new election and members filing, she would have to file in Saline County after that. But I will say, kind of going back to that text that I referenced, there were a lot of folks. It was Lorri, Courtney, Sarah Dunklin, Brenda Vassar-Taylor, Jenny Lauren, Frank, Scott, some other folks on this text message. And I want to explain to people why there was already some frustration with these folks with me before the July 1st event, and they just used the July 1st event as an excuse to turn against me, so to speak. So in this text, they were getting, they would constantly be talking. I'm not a text group person. I'm just not. I will chime in if I have something relevant to share, I will, but otherwise I'm not going to sit on my phone texting back and forth in a group chat all day. But that's what they would do. And then they would get frustrated with me when I wasn't giving them constant information about what was going on with the RPA fight. And of course, I mean, I had a lot going on, Constitution camp, I homeschool my kids, I have my own practice. And so with this, they were getting frustrated because they wanted the constant updates and to be included in everything. And I frankly just don't have the time for that. I just don't. Even right before the convention, I was teaching vacation Bible school at my church to over 500 kids. We had over 500. It's just a busy week. And then I would spend some of the evenings talking to folks through Zoom. But my thought was, okay, I just got to get through this week and it's over with. But typically, and you know this as a friend, and so many other folks know, I just can't be on call for this political world 24/7. It takes up probably about 20% of my life, and that's more than it really should. I have a lot of other obligations. I usually come in at the last minute and get involved, but they were frustrated with me because they weren't included in being informed about everything that was happening. So they were frustrated. And then when this situation happened on July 1st with Scott Gray, that just seemed to be their excuse to be able to get rid of me. And so that's what happened.
Well, that really opened the door for Joseph Wood and the state executive committee to do what they'd already planned to do. But it really just kind of teed it up because there was enough chaos going on at that point that they thought, okay, this is the perfect time to do it for that July 25th meeting when they declared null and void what happened at the convention, right, on what we put in at the convention. And that kind of brings us to what I want to talk about is the abandonment of these people to the at the state convention. You had Sarah Dunklin carrying the flag for the Patriots and the Grassroots. You had Scott Gray carrying that flag. You had Lorri Justice carrying the flag. Courtney Roldan, Margot Herzl. Jennifer Hopper served as the secretary at the convention, carrying the flag. So after the July 25th meeting where they declared null and void, and all this chaos coming on, we saw very shortly after that a pivot to where all those folks I just mentioned dropped that flag, abandoned the people of the RPA, abandoned the grassroots people, and abandoned the fight for the convention, dropped that flag and actually started aligning with Joseph Wood and the state committee and the bureaucrats. I'll use this analogy and then I want you to jump in there. When you see the Russians and the Chinese partner together, or North Korea and Russia partner together, or Iran and China partner together, that's the same analogy that works here. You're literally seeing these folks partner right now with Joseph Wood, the establishment, and the political elite. Take it from there.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is what we're witnessing right here. So yes, they got mad. And then the July 1st event, they became more angry because I wouldn't clue them into what was happening in Saline County. Because frankly, it wasn't appropriate. It wasn't any of their business. That was Saline County that needed to deal with Saline County. But they wanted to come in. They even started attending our meetings. And I have it on, I was told that Frank Curtis brought some of them in to give speeches, basically lecture some of us at the September 5th meeting. That's why so many of them were there, was because they were going to talk to us about what they thought was how we should handle things. So, nonetheless, but yeah, going back, Joe Wood didn't have to do anything. The Patriots, Scott Gray and Sarah Dunklin and Lorri, they burned it down, and Joe Wood and Sarah Sanders didn't have to lift a finger.
No, they didn't.
But, I would say it's not over. It doesn't have to be over. People can tell Who is still staying the course? Who is still fighting? I am still fighting. I still have this lawsuit against the RPA. I'm not going anywhere. Clint is still fighting on the paper ballot front. But it's really sad if you really look at this, Lorri Justice and Stephanie Johnson, that JP referred to, they were asked to come speak to a committee at the Capitol building. And instead of speaking and staying focused on the issue, they totally disparaged Clint, threw him under the bus. That is where we're at. Now, if our patriot movement is going to embrace and accept that kind of behavior, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm just not. I'm not. I'm out. This turned into a power struggle. Let me put it that way.
I was just going to say, we've seen the attacks on patriots and grassroots people. We've seen the attacks on Mike Schnakel, the chairman of the Hot Springs Republican Committee. We've seen the attacks on Stephanie Duke. We've seen the attacks on patriots that are involved in the grassroots. Very personal, very vicious attacks on those folks, but they're still here. They're still fighting for the people. They haven't abandoned the people. The 22, besides, I want people to know Jennifer spearheaded this lawsuit against Joseph Wood and John Thurston, but there's 22 plaintiffs on there. And so I want people to know it's not just Jennifer, there's 22 plaintiffs on there. Those people are fighting, and those people are actually being attacked for being part of that lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, some of them are, and it's really unfortunate. Any patriot that steps up now, and I think Mike Schnakel is a great example. He has now stepped up, and what are we seeing from this patriot faction that's broken off? And I mean, they're really vitriolic. Well, they're attacking him. Yeah. And the thing is, as I said, if we're going to expose behavior in this political arena, absolutely. Let's expose poor behavior. But to attack people because they disagree with you, it's totally different. Filing fraudulent ethics complaints, filing fraudulent police reports, filing or calling people horrific names like what Scott Gray called Ron Nichols. That's unacceptable. That does not help anything. That does not make our party better. And so that's why I say I'm not going to be a part of that if we're just now in it, because now all it has become is a power struggle, as I said. And I'm not interested in the power struggle. I'm only here. I'm fighting because I want to see biblical principles, Republican principles put at the forefront again. And I want to see our elected officials voting according to our values and principles.
You knew what Scott Gray was like, so that was not unexpected. What Scott Gray was going to do, or Stephanie Johnson was going to do, or that faction down there. What had to be unexpected was the Lorri Justice in there, somewhat the Courtney, especially the Courtney Roldan, the Margot Herzl, the Jennifer Hopper, but probably the biggest one that you didn't see coming, that nobody saw coming, was Sarah Dunklin. Mm-hmm. And she literally had been fighting this battle, carrying the grassroots flag. You guys had worked together so hard, and she just turned on a dime. And I'm going to say it, I'm convinced that she sold out to Joseph Wood, the governor's office, in the establishment, because she turned on a dime, and she literally. And you're not going to say this, or you may not say this, but I'm going to say it. We saw at the District 1 and 2 convention in September, she literally got on stage and literally had a nervous breakdown on stage. She's totally lost it. She's totally lost it and abandoned the people. Now, that's my take. But how did you feel? All those other people was pretty tough. Courtney Roldan was tough. You've done a lot for Courtney. Lorri, you could kind of see coming. Margot Herzl, you've been good. But Sarah Dunklin, that really hit you, didn't it?
Yeah. To be honest, it did. With Lorri, I wasn't surprised at all. I've always known Lorri kind of, had a cold shoulder towards me. We're going to work together. I thought we believed in the same things. So I've known it for a couple of years. I've known that, you know, there was some ice there. I don't know where it came from. I always sensed it from her. So when she turned, that didn't surprise me at all. I always knew she just needed a good excuse to turn against me, and she would. Courtney, maybe a little bit surprising. I didn't know Courtney all that well. I think she said we were good friends. We weren't. We're friendly. I did host a birthday party for her, which that probably sounds like that we're really friendly, but that was because she told me that she wasn't getting celebrated that weekend. Her husband wasn't doing anything. Her kids weren't doing anything. And I was like, oh man, I mean, it's your birthday. Everybody needs to be celebrated on their birthday. So I said, why don't you come over and we'll order pizza and the kids can swim. So she came over and I invited a few other folks over that I knew, she enjoyed spending time with. So it was informal. Yes, I encouraged her to do the podcast. I bought the equipment, paid for the software, all the things. I did that because I thought she had a voice, and she's about, I think, a little bit older than me, but she's, a mom that's passionate, and I just wanted to help her. As far as like friendships and did I ever confide in her? No, there's nothing like that. So I would say, yes, I was disappointed, but I never really had any expectations of loyalty or friendship from Courtney. So that one didn't hurt. Margot, a little bit surprised because I thought, again, we shared the similar values, but I didn't really get to know her very well either. I think I met her over the summer. Sarah, yes. Sarah, it really disappointed me and surprised me. It really did. And had I not lived through this, I wouldn't believe it true. But I will say that what had happened was we were coming up on the deadline to file the election certificate, which is September 15th. And some folks were calling around trying to pressure me. And I even got a call from a election commissioner who gave me a heads up. He said, hey, some powerful people have called the State Board of Election Commissioners, and apparently they were calling around trying to find some people who had influence over me to force me to sign that certificate. And it was that same day that Sarah, she turned on me, which was surprising because we had been working on this for 2 months. I mean, she was like my sister. We talked about all these things, and we were on the same page about how the RPA had messed it up and how it should be fixed.
I interviewed several times. I interviewed both of you together.
Yeah, I CC'd on emails with the RNC. I included her in some of those discussions. So it was really surprising when she turned. And when she turned, she didn't say, hey, I've been thinking about it, and this is why I think it would be right for you to sign this. She just started saying I'm irrational and just kind of making some personal attacks, at which point I realized with everything else that was going on, there was something at play there that I was not privy to. And I just said, Sarah, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And that was kind of the beginning. And then things got real there. I will tell you, after the convention, things were already different. But after that day, things became very different. And, we were preparing for our district meeting, and I asked for a phone number. I had the phone number. I didn't think I'd saved it. And I was like, can you send me this phone number? And she was like, no, like she just refused to send it to me. I mean, so there are all these things that were going on that I'd never experienced with her before. That same day, you remember the district meeting, she made the unilateral decision not to allow you into the meeting. She didn't discuss that with me. This was a joint endeavor. This is something that we plan and do together. She didn't tell me. I heard about this through a third party. And then her argument was, well, I signed the contract. So what did I do? I walked down to the office. I said, hey, where's our contract? Asked for a pen, and I signed it too, which made her really mad. And she was like, you tricked him. I was like, no, I didn't. They knew that I was there in an official capacity as somebody that was organizing the event. So they had no problem giving me the contract. They saw me directing things. And so I signed it. I was like, Sarah, I signed it. I didn't backdate it. I dated it for that same day. I said, I'm bound to this contract verbally, just as, Sarah was the one that physically signed it. But we agreed to split all the expenses and, to do everything half. And so that's just another example of how different things were that day. And so I think
that day really solidified my thoughts, okay? And because I got to know Sarah and for quite some time, and I'm going to say it, I don't care who likes it. For quite some time, her emotions and mental state were really off balance. And you could tell it talking to her. And in that day, when I say, the way she acted that day, she was in the middle of a nervous breakdown. There's no question in my mind about it. How she acted on stand, how she acted to the police, how she acted in public there. She was not in control. She had totally lost it. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that really showcased her mental state. And I think a lot of people saw it. And the reason I bring that up is because we talk about people manipulating people and playing on their weaknesses and playing on things. I think she completely turned her back on the people, completely turned her back on the convention, completely turned her back on everything that she said she had stood for. And with her mental state, I really think that the establishment, Joseph Wood and that whole bunch, and Scott Gray had gotten her head enough that they manipulated and used her mental issues to their benefit on that. Now, that's just my take. But you have to admit, that day, she had no control whatsoever, did she?
That week, my interaction with her, she did seem just like a different person. And I will say I get spicy. I think everybody knows that. So I was.
Yeah, the Mexican comes out in you. The Mexican comes out in you.
There was a time where I called Jennifer Hopper asking her to bring some documents because I had been locked out of our system that showed everybody that had registered. Now, it was an accident, so they claim, but I couldn't access that. So I called Jennifer, and Sarah was nearby. I called Jennifer Hopper to say, can you print this off for me? Because I need it. Sarah turns to me and says, you don't remember me telling you that I did that? And I snapped back and I was like, well, I've had enough of your mouth. So listen, I wasn't totally innocent. I was getting very testy at that point because there had just been so many things happening. But so we definitely had a tiff, and we'd never had a fight before, I would say. So neither one of us, I would say, that weekend, it wasn't a shining moment for either. Yes, her behavior that week, in my opinion, was I had never seen that from her before.
Unhinged.
So, I don't know. I don't want to say.
Would you call it unhinged?
I'm not going to say that.
I will. It was unhinged.
But I do want to address this because, I called Clint when I found out they weren't going to let you in the building. Of course, I just found out as you're arriving and the event has already started. I wasn't even given the courtesy of, hey, let's not have Jimmie this time just because, we didn't have that conversation. It was just made and it was hidden from me. I just happened to find out about it. So,
so everybody understands they used the fight a couple of days before.
Yes.
The fight is the reason because suddenly I'm a danger. I'm a danger because I protect women.
Right. I think this very issue goes back to the local control issue, does it not? Because there was the first district meeting and there was a second district meeting. And as the chair of the second district, I should certainly be aware of any reservations about having a district member present. Furthermore, I'm not going to sit quietly by and allow somebody who's not even a member of our second district to dictate who can and cannot attend a second district meeting. So I didn't defend you because you're my friend. Sorry, Jimmie. I defended you and I defended this decision to allow you in because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Not even in my opinion, I didn't even have a right to say you couldn't come in. That was a decision that should be made by the body. If the body had concerns or any member had concerns, they can make a motion and then the body can vote on whether or not a district member can attend the meeting or not. And that's how that should have been handled, not by an outside individual. And so that kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like the behavior from Sarah is just something I never expected, because we talk about local control all the time and how the people should rule. And that was antithetical. What she was doing was antithetical to everything that we claim to believe in. So now with that said, yeah,
All
the
right,
meeting
let's be clear though. Let's be clear so people understand. I came in.
you did come in.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why that animosity came
Yeah.
out, was because she did make it a public fight. And she said you weren't coming in, and then you did come in. And yes, I did fight hard. You saw me, Jimmie. You
Yeah.
saw me
No,
tell the,
you did. You
tell the police what I thought. And
did.
so,
You did.
but with Clint, I called Clint and I said, Clint, I've got to go and start this meeting, but they're not going to let Jimmie in. And but Sarah's not going to let Jimmie in. Well, Clint, I will tell you, Clint was privy. He knew about the text messages that Scott and Frank, in the text group that they had started, and the awful things they were saying about me, and how Sarah was a part of that. And this was before any of this came up. This had been happening for probably at least a month before that district meeting. He knew I was hurt because I would never be a part of a group that is disparaging Sarah or any one of my friends, and just sit silently by. So I was hurt. And of course, my husband knew that. He'd heard Sarah yell at me on the phone. So he was aware of some things, and he knew how she had talked to me about the elector certificate just a few days prior. And so when he found out that you weren't coming in, and I was upset. I was like, what is my friend doing? What is happening here? None of this makes sense, but I got to go do this meeting. Clint, can you handle this for me? And so he texted her and he said, listen, if you're not going to let Jimmie in, like, I'm not going to represent you anymore. And truthfully, Clint was representing her because of me, because Clint doesn't like doing domestic relations cases anymore. He took it because she was a friend of mine. So he was like, it's not worth it anymore. And so he's like, if this is how you're going to be treating my wife, I'm not going to represent you anymore. So that's really where that came from. And then it just became like Clint was
it also becomes a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
That's a public building. I have every right to come into it.
Yes.
And so that's
why you're there.
Yeah. So at that point, and we're going to have to get wrapped up, but I do want to get this. She even went so far. You guys had a great guest in Margie Taylor Greene there. Whole state was excited about it, right? So excited. Even in Cavin, Arkansas, there are some liberals. All 6 of them showed up to protest outside the building. I say, but Sarah, to me, and I'm going to go back to it, was in such a poor mental state, unhinged in my opinion, and having a breakdown. She even brought these local fights and everything and started engaging Marjorie Taylor Greene about it. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Again, that's just another one of those things that I was shocked to witness. I mean, I apologize to Marjorie Taylor Greene when I saw that Sarah was bringing the fight in front of her and to her. I was
talking to her about it. And she didn't agree to do this event, to fly down there to hear about local fights, right?
Right. It was, that was embarrassing. But I apologized and explained, and I told her, hey, this is all going to get resolved. She was good. She was very nice.
Everybody knows I met her, shook her hand. I didn't punch her. Nothing happened. So
yes, you did meet her. And despite all of the antics and oh my gosh, Jimmie's going to punch Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the crazy accusations that were flying around that morning. No, I have a picture. You shook her hand and greeted her, and it was a very pleasant exchange. I'm glad you got that opportunity.
So tell me this. Where are we at right now? We're in just a few days. In just a few days, we're going to have the state committee and the state elections.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are we at right now?
Yeah. So right now, Mike Schnakel, he is from Hot Spring County, and he is the one that has filed to run for chair against Joseph Wood. And I think he is a great candidate. Yep. He believes in our Patriot mantra. He believes in local control. He believes in we the people. And I think he's going to be a great leader. I have personally watched him chair meetings, and he does a great job. He has mastered Robert's rules. He genuinely cares about applying the rules rules fairly. He embodies everything that we believe in. And so I wholeheartedly endorse Mike for this position. Also, Candy Cox, who I just love. She is running for first vice, and she'll make an excellent first vice. She too is a great leader. She has ran plenty of meetings flawlessly. She knows Robert's rules and she knows the RPA rules, and she is going to apply herself to really be a great leader, because that's what she does. She's just somebody who really cares and wants to do a good job, and boy, does she love Jesus. And so I think they're both going to be excellent leaders. I think this is also a good time to say that despite what the Grays and some of those folks said that I was going to run for RPA chair, I'm not, and I'm not going to. I'm a homeschool mom. I'm not taking an office job in Little Rock. It's just not going to happen. So I'm happy to support these great people who have stepped up and are willing to take on this battle. And I hope that all of our patriots will get behind them, encourage them, pray for them, and then vote for them.
One thing we're about to find out in just a few short days at the state committee, and I want to see if this is your take. The people spoke at the convention. The people spoke on what they wanted in the rules and what they wanted in the platform. Part of what's in the rules is that the state representatives, state senators, even our United States senators and congressmen, we changed the rules at the convention. They've always had voting power in the state committee, and we changed that. They can be a member of the state committee. They just don't have voting power, to remove that sway of the power of the government over the people. And we changed it to where the people could more have the power there. Of course, with what Joseph Wood did in state executive community, declared that null and void. So these state representatives, these state senators, our United States congressmen, our United States senators, all have to make a choice at that meeting. Are they going to go with the rules the people in the platform the people decided on? Or are they going to go with the rules that the establishment, Joseph Wood and the governor's office, established? So they're literally about to have to choose: are we with the people or are we with the establishment? I already know what a lot of them are going to do. How many of them do you think are actually going to side and stand with the people?
Oh my.
Expectations aren't high on that, are you? Yeah, maybe two.
Maybe two.
Yeah.
And I will say that the governor's office and the RPA, they have worked very hard to turn those folks against us. And they've gotten them to believe that somehow this was a forum, that vote to make elected officials non-voting members of the state committee, they convinced them that that was the people retaliating against them, when in reality we weren't. The people, they weren't. We have now joined, by doing that, we have joined the majority of states who've done the same thing, that the elected officials are just non-voting members of the state committee. Those positions and the party issues should be voted on by the people. It seems to be a conflict of interest when you allow elected officials to come in and vote on these issues. So we haven't done anything unusual. As a matter of fact, we are now joining the majority of the states and the RNC, who has the exact same rule in place that all elected officials are non-voting members on the RNC. So, but our local officials have been convinced that it's an act of retaliation or aggression on our part. And so I think you're probably going to see the majority of them vote they believe what they're being told by the RPA apparatus, and they're probably going to vote as the governor tells them to again.
They're going to defy the people and actually vote, is what they're going to do. Of course, we've seen this movie before a lot of times at the state capitol. And for the people that don't go when the legislature's in session, I recommend you do get more involved and go to these committee meetings. And I'm going to explain why. Just be prepared when you leave the capitol the other day to immediately go take a shower. Every time I go to that state capitol, when I leave, I want to go take a shower immediately. But you've seen it, I've seen it. We saw it in Senator Blake Johnson's committee meeting over the FOIA deal. They literally said the people are telling them we don't want this, and the governor's telling them that I want it. And we literally saw them go, look, I'm not here for you. I'm here for representing government. They literally said, hey, we're going to side with government, not with the people, but with government. We've seen that. So we know what's going to happen at the state committee meeting, right? You sat in that chair in front of Senator Blake Johnson. You and him had a pretty spirited back and forth. He said, I didn't even know you, but I said, I fell in love with this chick that day. I said, I love that chick. And the way y'all were going at it, and I got kicked out at meeting, as a matter of fact, right?
You did.
But we've seen this before at the state capitol. We've seen it in committee meetings. It's in where they literally choose to not be with the people, but with government. That's literally this choice right now, to be with the people or with government. And you just said it, maybe two is your best guess, right? Maybe two that will side with the people.
I think so. And that's being generous.
Yeah.
I do. I think they will justify in their mind what they want to do, which is they want to keep the governor happy because, she's a young governor, she's a popular governor, and I think everybody knows that she has lofty aspirations beyond being governor, and I think people want to hitch their wagon to her and hope that they are able to follow her to wherever it is she goes. And it's going to take some really brave, principled folks to just say, I'm going to do what's right, even if it makes certain people mad. I know it's not easy, especially if you want politics to be your career, which I would just encourage everybody to not pursue that. That was not intended by our founders. But yeah, I think most people in politics are wanting that longevity. And in order to do that, there is some deals and compromises and sacrifices that are made.
Last question before we get out of here. Okay, and I've been very vocal about this. My belief is that most of the people in this state, the electors, the voters, right, in the grassroots people are all red. Okay, true conservatives, really conservative, red, solid red. So as far as the governor's office and the state legislature, I'm gonna give you a choice here. Is the governor's office and state capitol red or is it purple?
It's purple.
Solid purple.
It's
heavily
what?
purple. Heavily purple.
Yes, there are some social issues that they usually get right-ish. But on the principles of local control and listening to the people and deferring to the people, and again, Thomas Jefferson, he said this: if the people disagree with the elected official's position, it's the elected official's position to go out and educate the people. But right now, it's like the people are just banging on the doors and sending emails and begging the elected officials to represent us and not rule us.
Yeah.
But right now, the mentality from so many of our elected officials is that they know what's best. They have all this insider knowledge. We just need to go about our lives and be quiet and let them handle it and trust them. And that's not what our founding fathers intended. That's not what we should tolerate or expect. And we need to get back to saying, no, the people rule. Please listen to us. And we should be able to communicate in a very civil manner and understand why our elected officials are voting the way that they are.
Nothing illustrates the point of what you just said than Senator Blake Johnson's committee meetings on FOIA. Nothing illustrates that more than what you just said. They made clear that they were there for the governor's call, not for the people, but for the governor's call and to do her bidding. That's probably what we're going to see at the state committee meeting. But anyhow, listen, I'm sorry I kept you longer than I'd planned to, but the conversation was just too interesting to stop. So I think it's good that people are going to get your perspectives, get to hear some things they haven't heard. I'm glad you finally said, yeah, I'm going to get out there and talk about this. I'm going to get it. It's not easy to talk about it, and you try to take the high road. You really do. And so that's the reason you've been hesitant. I want people to know I pushed her. I've been pushing her to come on here and talk about this. She is not wanting to do it because she literally tries to take that high road on stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Well, thank you for having me, Jimmie. I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, that's great. All right. We're going to say our prayers for the next few days on the state committee, right? We never give up.
We are. Yep. See you there.
All right, Jen. All right. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.